Welcome to Done with Debauchery, a podcast hosted by Denise and Keisha, two friends who share intimate conversations about alcohol and drug use, struggling with sobriety, and our personal paths to wellness.
Hello and welcome back to Done with Debauchery. I'm Keisha and this is my co-host Denise.
Hi there.
You've probably heard the popular expression, everything in moderation. The expression is basically telling us to avoid extremes in our behavior, and at the surface, this sounds like pretty good advice. But is drinking in moderation actually a good idea? And is it even possible for everyone? On today's episode, we're going to discuss just that, and share some of our personal experiences of trying to moderate our own drinking and the controversial label of a relapse. Let's get into it. For me, moderating was the first step that I took when I was trying to change my drinking habits or really assess my relationship with alcohol. So it definitely started a few years ago, likely in my mid-20s. I would sort of set like boundaries or rules for myself based around drinking. So whether that would be limiting the number of drinks I would have in a night, not allowing myself to do any shots, never drinking alone at home, just lots of little rules that I felt like if I was able to stay within these rules that I set out, that would mean that I had my drinking under control. I feel like I set these rules and the majority of the time I wasn't able to actually drink within them, which just led me to feel even worse about the decisions I was making regarding alcohol.
Yeah, because I think once you set a rule and then you continually are unable to follow through on that rule, you're depreciating your own self-trust because you're unfortunately unable to stay accountable to this promise that you've set for yourself. But you know, it's almost such an unrealistic expectation to take a substance that reduces your inhibitions and increases pleasure hormones so that you want more, but then also expect yourself to have stronger willpower and follow through
while under the influence.
While you've reduced your inhibitions and your decision-making capabilities and reduced, your willpower to be able to follow through on this promise that A, I would only have 3 drinks, or B, I'm not going to have any shots. Well, once you had 4 drinks, are you actually going to say no to the shots?
Never.
No. But I think everybody can really relate to what you're saying, probably in one way or another, whether they would classify themselves as someone with substance use disorder or, are binge drinkers or are actually just moderate drinkers. I think a lot of people try to moderate their use and set limitations with how much they're going to consume and oftentimes probably go above and beyond that amount. Yeah. I know for me, I've been trying to moderate my drinking for years, like probably over a decade. And I would say 95 to 98% of the time, I was unsuccessful in following through on that. Just like you, I would make all kinds of rules. And I think part of that is to establish like control and a safety mechanism. Once you've established rules, it somehow feels safer, like you're in control, even whether or not you follow through on those rules or not. But it's like, don't drink on, Monday to Thursday. But then, an event pops up on Thursday and then it's like, okay, well, I just won't drink on Saturday that day, that week.
You start making exceptions.
Exactly. Yeah. So I do think, though, that moderation also was a way of avoiding, and actually still is for me now, is like an idea that pops up into my head, and it's like a way of avoiding having to accept the fact that I may not ever be able to drink, because that feels very
scary,
overwhelming. Yeah, like it's like a forever thing that you're gonna have to battle and always have these urges or thoughts, or you're gonna be discluded. And so, I think a lot of thoughts pop into my mind still currently that I am going to be able to moderate and that things are going to be different. It's kind of like when you revisit your, like, an ex-boyfriend, you just remember the good times.
Yeah, you romanticize the relationship and you only remember the good, the fun times. You don't remember that first, like, really dark episode where, of course, like, you did go outside of those limits and something shitty happened.
Yeah. Like, you forget how it feels like when you broke a promise to yourself or, a really terrible hangover. And I think that's what gets, like, sneaky sometimes a little bit after you have some time under your belt, is like that.
Yeah.
You start to forget how shitty you were feeling because there's actually been so much space and time between the last time you felt that way versus now.
Yeah, you get this almost false sense of confidence. Like, if I've been able to abstain fully for this amount of time, I must actually have a real control over this substance in my life. So I know for myself, like, the first time that I actually tried to completely go sober was in 2020 or no. When was it? I think so it was last year. It was 2021. It started as dry January and I started feeling really good about 4 weeks in that I ended up committing and doing 3 months. And then from there, I really felt like my relationship with alcohol had changed because I was able to stop for those 3 months. So I did start drinking again a little bit. And again, it quickly did spiral into an uncomfortable relationship that I felt like drinking at home alone, like having wine more evenings than I wanted to. So I put that firm stop on it again. And that kind of took us into the summer of last year where I had been sober for 99 days. And you and I had this like cottage weekend that we had planned where we booked this like beautiful little cottage, just you and I and our dogs on the water. And we were both not drinking at the time.
No, and I think we were feeling pretty confident that it was going to be easy because we were both, had been, sober
committed
for a few months at that time. There was no intention of reintroducing alcohol back into our lives at that time.
And then it all changed.
No, but truthfully, yeah, it did. Like, on that drive up, like, we both started to want to have some wine and some rosé.
I think we were just having a good time. We were having fun. We were excited about the cottage and the possibilities. And we felt like it was a safe space because we were going to be secluded at this property. There was no real opportunity for things to get out of hand. There was no opportunity for us to get drugs or anything like that. So at least for me, it felt like a safe space to start experimenting or reintroducing alcohol.
Yeah, and I don't think I really spent a lot of time thinking about it. We made a decision in the moment without really thinking through what opening that door back up would mean for both of us, for our time at the cottage, and maybe for, the next handful of months to come. And I think that's kind of the trick that your mind plays on you, because you get this thought in your mind that's like, hey, I'd like to have a drink of alcohol. And then the next thought that pops into your mind is like, yeah, we're gonna be able to just have one or two. Yeah. And you start to like believe those thoughts. And I think those thoughts start to become your reality. And then it is like, what's the harm? I have things under control. I've had it under control for a little while now. And you start to believe your thought instead of actually maybe taking some space and distancing from that thought and really kind of questioning it from a curious standpoint. And I think when you're in the moment, when I was in the moment, when we made that decision to drink, I didn't take any time or space. I just accepted those thoughts and like was fun. And I wanted to do that as the way that it was. And away we went to the liquor store to get some wine. And it all started out as we were getting one bottle of wine. We were going to have 2 drinks each.
Already trying to moderate it before we even got it in our possession.
But I think that's how we convinced ourselves it was also okay, is that like we had these like false control mechanisms that made us feel like we had the situation under control. Mm-hmm. And in hindsight, I was saying to Keisha that there are so many like red flags. We obviously went into the liquor store and immediately bought more than one bottle of wine. I think we walked out with 3.
Yeah.
And then the first night of just having 2 glasses of wine upon our, arrival, obviously we drank more than that.
Yeah.
And even went back to the liquor store like 2 days later. And so, no, we weren't like drinking to get trashed. But as soon as we opened that can of worms, it was just kind of like free flowing. And I guess my point is more that moderation doesn't have to be a specific amount or number, but when you set an intention and then you are unable to follow through on it, regardless of what that intention is or was, is you have to ask yourself, do you really have the ability to moderate?
Yeah. Am I in control of this situation? Which was a hard no, looking back at it. And I do remember in the moment and on the drive up when we were it started as joking about going and getting a bottle of wine. And I was having an internal dialogue where I was so proud of my 99 days of not drinking. It was the longest that I had ever gone without drinking for as long as I can remember. And I was like, I had my heart set on getting to that 100-day milestone. So I was going back and forth, but in the moment, like that thought of like just having a nice glass of rosé at our cottage that was called the Rosé Chalet. It just like really, it took over and it made me feel like, yeah, like you can definitely control this and then go back to not drinking. You'll be fine.
And that was the intention. Like, we were supposed to only have the 1 bottle of wine on the one night, and we weren't going to drink the rest of the time because we had been feeling so good. But you also, I think, underestimate the length of time that you had taken prior to that, which is many years of creating those, like, pleasure pathways in your brains. And as soon as you, like, turn those things back on, like, I think that they're very powerful. We're more powerful than your willpower is. So what I think is also really important to highlight is that it's also a sneaky progression. So it's not like you wake up the next day and you're like, shit, I'm unable to moderate. I made this huge mistake. But it's like, at least in my experience, is that like your drinking tolerance and those bingey type tendencies and behaviors are gradual increases week by week. So I don't really think like major binges started to happen again for me probably until we were like a couple months past that point where we reintroduced alcohol.
I agree.
And 10 years ago when I didn't drink for well over a year, I made the decision to obviously reintroduce alcohol into my life. And you know what? I was a very moderate drinker, like having 1 to 2 drinks for like a year, maybe even 2 years. But, then I had 3 drinks and then I would get drunk occasionally or binge drink occasionally. But then those times started to become closer and closer together. And I had, less and less concerns for my behavior. So I guess my point is just that it can change very slowly over time. And at least for me and the type of drinker or substance user that I am, is that it is a slippery slope. Like, it actually took almost 8 years, maybe even 10 years for me to get back into a drinking and substance use, like binging tendency where I felt like I really had to fully abstain again and reevaluate my behaviors.
Yeah.
So when you look back on our decision to open the door and drink that weekend, if you knew it was going to be this
snowball
and 4 to 6 month of kind of struggle, because I think for a good portion of that there was this intention to stop drinking and then not following through, and then that going, at least I know for me that's what was going on for the last 6 months or so.
Yeah, me too.
Would you have opened that can of worms? Was it worth it?
Yeah, I mean, no, looking back at it, of course, like we always say, hindsight is 20/20, but if I knew that like my decision in that moment would take me so long to get back to those 99 days that I was so proud of, I wouldn't have started. But I do think that you made a really good point in saying that for that 1 year, like, you were able to moderate at some point. And not to say that it's not possible for anyone, but I think that just for us and like what our relationship has evolved into with alcohol, we now know for a fact that it's not possible for us. But for some people, they may find value in taking that break, whether it be 99 days, a year, and then they can come back and fully moderate. But I just know that for me, that's not what it looks like.
At this time, you know? And, I do know people that have fully cut out substances and alcohol for a number of years and then have been able to reintroduce it in a very moderate sense. So I think it is highly, highly personalized. And when I was looking, and thinking about moderation, I found some information online that said that moderation was successful or can be successful with problem drinkers, but not with people that classify with alcohol use disorder. And I just thought that was such a blanket statement because I don't identify with alcohol use disorder, but I would consider myself a problem drinker because I think a problem drinker is somebody who binges or is possibly, a gray area drinker. And to say that you need to wait until your problem drinking becomes substance use disorder before you would evaluate whether or not moderation works for you was just such a weird statement. I was like, this makes absolutely no sense. Like, you should wait until that rock bottom moment.
Wait until it's a crisis.
Wait until you lose everything and your life is in total chaos. And I think that problem drinkers are really the ones that should be evaluating whether they can moderate.
Yeah, before it gets to that point, for sure.
Yeah. Upon reintroducing alcohol, the conditions in your life could be, very low stress at that time. And you may be fully able to moderate or drink, in a responsible way during that time. But as we've all experienced over the past 2 years, there, unexpected life stresses like COVID or relationships or career stress can pop up at any time. And I think for me, one of the things that is really important is like setting myself up so that when those things happen in my life, I'm able to cope and handle them in the healthiest way that I can. And in my previous experience over the last 10 years, when I've had alcohol in my life and have been, even maybe in a position that I'm drinking responsibly, I'm the type of person that when those life stresses increase, so does my substance use. So I think it's like you really also have to ask yourself if moderation is possible for you should your life situation unexpectedly change.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that it's so true. And it even, I relate to it. And when I was trying to moderate my drinking, for me, 2020 was a really rough year and I did suffer some pretty significant losses. And the next year, when I was even trying to moderate, I still felt the impacts of those emotional traumas that I experienced. And I definitely was using alcohol and substances as a way to try and escape. So yeah, maybe at the beginning I was able to moderate, but as those stresses builded up and things just felt overwhelming, it was the one sort of, not a resource, but the one escape that I've used consistently over the last few years that has sort of always been there, no matter what I'm going through. It's like that crutch you could always fall back on.
Yeah, you essentially are setting the stage for an unhealthy coping mechanism to become, the coping mechanism that you lean on in those situations. And I think with people that tend to drink a little more than they should, whether that's from a social partying aspect, is that I think it does tend to be the direction that you take when your life situation changes. The other thing about moderation is that I find personally that when I set these intentions to moderate or drink, 1 drink or 2 drink, then when I'm out in social circumstances, I literally spend the entire time thinking about this rule I've set for myself for consumption. So I'm not even able to be present with in these, I'm thinking of a dinner or even just a work event or whatever it is, because I'm so focused on not having more or the drink and following through on these moderating rules I've laid out for myself. And that honestly does not feel like freedom to me. It's more uncomfortable than just having an urge to want alcohol, reminding myself that I'm absolutely having none, and then having resentment, but accepting that that's the way and
Yeah.
just moving on with it. Because for me, moderation is like half in, half out. And I find I spend the whole time almost arguing and like weighing one way or the other about what I'm doing. I'm in this total push and pull throughout the whole experience.
Yeah, do I stick to the rules that I set for myself, or is it okay to bend them just a
Should I
little
drink
bit
slower?
this
Am I
one
drinking
time?
yes,
I
like,
feel
it's
the
the
same,
worst.
and I almost get like fixated on like the
Fixated,
number of drinks.
obsessed.
How many have I had? Can I maximize like the alcohol percentage intake by switching to a different liquor? Should I have a shot instead of a glass of wine? I totally get that. And it just makes it the whole experience of whatever you're doing just so much less enjoyable.
You're not present at all. You're not in the experience. You are in your head in a negotiation. That's what moderation for me becomes a negotiation. And I actually find a very similar thing with diet mentality is just that pull and push. Can I remove this and add this in? Oh, that glass of wine was small. Like there's just this calculation negotiation that's going on constantly. And honestly, that doesn't feel freeing. And part of why I wanted to remove alcohol from my life is because I want to have freedom from it, freedom from some of the things that it takes away from me, but freedom of also like this compulsion of wanting to have it all the time. And so moderation honestly adds more negotiation, stress, thinking into my life than just removing it fully.
And for me personally, if I've set those moderation rules and then I am constantly not achieving them, I am not only now beating myself up for like having that anxiety and feeling shitty the next day, but also letting myself down repeatedly in more ways and feeling like, what is wrong with me? Like, why can't I just go out and feel satisfied after 1 or 2 glasses of wine like everybody else?
Yeah, and I think that affects your confidence in other aspects of your life too. It doesn't just stay pigeonholed into, shit, I'm not able to say I'm going to have 2 glasses of wine and not follow through on it. You start to like lose confidence towards like doing things in your career or like, even in social circumstances and all kinds of things that, you would need to be able to count on yourself and believe in yourself to be able to achieve.
Yeah.
So at the time when we made the decision to drink at the cottage, I was speaking to and seeing a therapist. And I remember he called our reintroduction of alcohol at the cottage a relapse. I was livid with the label.
I too was mad.
Because I think that word relapse, just like the word alcoholic carries like such a negative connotation. And I guess because I don't necessarily associate with the label of an addict, I didn't really like having my behavior change decision labeled as something like a relapse.
Yeah, because in that moment, we felt like we were making an intentional, conscious decision to stop and go get wine, and like we were fully in control of this scenario. It's not like it was extenuating circumstances and we couldn't control ourselves. We chose that behavior. So...
But then, when we look up a definition of a relapse online, it very much fits the definition. It's controlling a behavior, moving into a state of no control. And it starts as a slip, but then moves into relapse. And what I thought was so interesting about that is that, we probably, if it was just a slip, we would have drank that weekend, been like, oh shit, and then just stop.
Yeah.
But the reality is that the controlled behavior stays in a moderate controlled state for an amount of time. And it can be, I think, a long amount of time before it moves back into this state of less or no control.
Yeah.
And so at the moment, very close in time to when we actually reintroduced alcohol, I was not ready to accept that as a relapse. But now, just knowing and being in the experience of how hard it was to stop drinking again, it literally was a 5-month struggle to fully stop again. I do feel like it was a relapse. What are your thoughts?
Again, like automatically, like I want to say, no, it's not a relapse. I don't identify that. But hearing you read the definition and like relating to that, I guess it would be called a relapse for me. It's not so important to put that like label on it, but to like acknowledge what you said, that it was so hard for both of us to get back to a place where we even had like a week of not drinking. Like it felt like such a struggle. And I remember we would put almost like a joke, like a very light boundary, like we're not gonna drink tonight, we're not gonna drink this week.
Or like joking about failing all the time about sobriety, like that was the normal language in our conversation.
It was just easier to joke about it than to actually like look at each other and be like, why can't we get a handle on this? Like, what do we need to do differently? It's just easier to joke about it than to actually like make hard decisions and have those personal conversations with yourself about like, is this behavior like aligning with what I want overall for my life?
Yeah, and I think, there's like there are some things that set you up to use again, and you may not be realizing that some of the things that you're doing on a daily basis are actually setting this relapse or this reintroduction of the substance or alcohol back in motion. And I think it starts in an emotional level where you may not be taking proper care of yourself. So you may not be actually taking the time to meet your needs. So, at that time, you're probably not even thinking yet about reintroducing wine, but there is like this like slight bubbling under the surface of, maybe you're not, maybe you're experiencing less social activity than you were before. And maybe you're not spending enough downtime like meditating or connecting to yourself, or maybe connecting to nature, or whatever those things are that really you need to feel grounded. And then from there, I think you start to miss the substance. So you start to like think about it, right? And, maybe that's what happened when we were driving to the cottage is like, in the past, a lot of times at cottages, like, there's fun and day drinking.
Drinking
and, like,
on the dock.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, maybe there was this like lack of self-care, and then putting ourselves in these like emotional situations where we were triggered or cued, and then making the action or taking the action to actually physically use the substance. So I do feel like when you look at some of the stages and things like that, it does like it fully lines up. The label makes my skin crawl too. So I fully agree with you. But I do have to say that if I could go back in time, I don't think I would have opened the can of worms at the cottage. Obviously I'm very grateful for, the lessons and the learning and the experience. I can see all those things within it. And who knows, maybe we wouldn't have this podcast if, that can of worms didn't get reopened. But it was really hard to stop. Again, the most hard that it's ever been for me. And I feel like I've been on and off with substances for the last 10 years.
Yeah. And I feel like for me as well, like it was so hard. I feel like because again, like I was going through so many different things in my personal life between like COVID, a change in my work. There was just so many things that it was just so overwhelming, and it was like, fuck it. Yeah. What does it matter?
Yeah, I kind of felt like it was like the only fun thing, really.
Yeah.
And it's like, and it's fun until it's not. But yeah, there were so many other uncomfortable things going on, I think, in both of our lives. And it was just really fully a coping mechanism that felt fun in the moment, but the after effects were definitely not fun. Yeah. So do you feel like you have any early identifiers that you could pinpoint now that, in the future maybe kind of leading you down that path to be tricked into the reintroduction of alcohol? I won't use the word relapse.
Yeah, I feel like honestly, like as much as like we just talked about like setting those boundaries and those like timelines are not necessarily always helpful. I think for me, in a moment of like wanting to drink, I do need to put like a limit on it. And like for me, number one, I never have alcohol in the house. So if I am going to drink, it's going to be a very intentional decision. But it's like, what else can I do in that moment that's going to make me feel good? Like, can I go for a walk with my dog? Can I work out? Do I just need to have a bath? And finding other things that soothe my nervous system and make me feel good in that moment. So at the end, like, am I still really wanting that glass of wine, or was I needing some sort of comfort?
Yeah, and I feel like most of the time, especially when it's like I find an urge like that, it's that I'm needing some other kind of soothing or comfort. Like I haven't taken some time to like ground myself and just kind of like settle myself down. So, yeah, taking your dog for a walk or like having a bath, all those things that you said, it's like usually after you do those things, I don't care that much, or I don't want I'm not riding an urge that way anymore.
Yeah. And I think that like that's great for when you're alone, like at home and going through those feelings. But there's also that second layer of when you're in a social event, or like if let's say we were at the cottage with a group of other people and they're drinking and like you're the one person who's not. For me, it's really important to have a variety of non-alcoholic drinks available. Like my non-alcoholic drink purchasing has gone quite out of hand.
I will be photographing it for you guys later.
But like those are the things that like I need something to reach for that is going to be delicious. It's going to make me feel like I'm included in the party and that I'm not missing out.
Yeah, and I think what's really important in those situations are a few things. One is like knowing if you have the capacity to be in those situations, and I think part of that ties back into that self-care aspect, because I know if I'm not prioritizing my self-care and really doing the work to meet my needs, that I am not going to have the capacity to be in a situation like that is triggering and then stay accountable to myself because I'm already depleted. The other thing is I am being so strict about only saying yes to social situations when I feel fully aligned and am excited about them. Otherwise, when I'm kind of feeling like, I don't want to go do that, like it does put me in a situation where I'm more inclined to be like, fuck it, I'm going to drink. And that's probably because I'm not like doing things that are aligned in what's best for me. So then the drinking thing is like, who even fucking cares? I already kind of made a decision that wasn't the right one for me. So I think really checking in with yourself to make sure that the situations that you're putting yourself in are ones that really like light you up and that they're ones that you want to be in. And then I think also you really, really need to think about your future self. Like, is the future person that you're trying to become going to be happy if you make a decision to have some drinks with your friend on that dock? Or, are you going to be happier if you stay accountable to your decision to abstain?
Yeah. What am I giving up in exchange for this glass of wine?
Exactly. And I think the important thing is to play the tape until the end, because it's not what am I giving up in this moment, which maybe feels like this false sense of connection while everybody is inebriated, or maybe just you kind of feeling not fully included in the party. But it's like when you play the tape until the end, and what I mean by the end is it 5 months of struggling to close that door on the alcohol again? It's not just that one day, that one time. Is it, is there...
Or even the next day, the hangover.
No, exactly. So it's really taking into account, like, the full effect that opening that can of worms is going to have, and the possibilities, and is that actually worth it?
This is Keisha and Denise signing off on another episode of Done With Debauchery. Thanks for listening. If you liked what you heard, please share and subscribe. You can also find us on Instagram at Done With Debauchery. See you next time.